Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Ghostface Killah and Adrian Younge record, 12 Reasons to Die, Part 2. This is the sequel to the 2013 hip-hop album 12 Reasons to Die, and a collaborative record between wu-tang legend Ghostface Killah, possibly my favorite member of the Wu-Tang Clan, and also producer, multi-instrumentalist, band leader Adrian Younge. And this record was a creative, dramatic, gritty, hard-nosed story album. A tale of betrayal and revenge. And this new record over here is essentially the second installment of this storyline. Now, I'm not going to review this record by myself. I have brought on the one and only fellow YouTuber and critic of many things, the Granddad Wooly. And yeah, we're just gonna shoot the shit over this record. Transition, and now here we are via the magic of the internet with the Granddad Wooly himself doing this Ghostface Killah and Adrian Younge co-review. Give me, please, I said please, your overall thoughts on the record, your general thoughts on this record.
You know what? When I first heard about the album, I was like, okay, now I love the first album. First of all, that album was amazing. I'm a big Ghostface Killah fan, big Adrian Younge fan. So when I heard they were making two, I instantly got fucking hyped. I was like, yes, motherfuckers, another album, hell yeah. And then I thought, okay, how are they gonna go with the story? Are they gonna continue it? Is it gonna be a different story? And when I got into the album and I saw how they kind of, put a spin on it, and they brought in, Raekwon as Lester Kane, and they kind of put it a little bit further in the future now it's in the 70s in New York, and now it's sort of like a smart way to do it where they don't have to hinge off the first story so much, but they can bring the best parts, and that's what they did here with whoever wrote it, because I'm not sure Young wrote it. I think he gave the narrative to somebody else to write, and they just pretty much created a brand new story, just took the best parts, and I like that. That was smart. That's what I would have done if I wrote the fucking album. So I really did appreciate that. They didn't try to take too much from the first album, and they try to give this whole album its own essence and its own actual identity, which is real dope. So I like that. And for the most part, like, it worked for me. Like, when I listened to the whole project, I think the narrative was more cohesive. It was tighter. Like, there was a few loose ends on the first album, certain things that really weren't explained well. Here, I felt like they kind of got the point across a lot better, and it didn't seem like they were just trying to, I guess, for the most part, hurry the album up, because it's a short album. Both albums are short, but this one they kind of, utilized their time a little bit better on the second one. That's what I fucking thought, though. But
I think they kind of, I remember the first record, I needed to listen to it a few times to sort of piece every bit of the story together, because you really needed to listen into all the verses.
Right.
Every single verse advanced the storyline, which was even more so the case on that Souls of Mischief record that Adrian Younge had done with them.
Mm-hmm.
That was even more like a seamlessly flowing story album than 12 Reasons to Die was. But with 12 Reasons to Die, you really needed to read into those verses, whereas I feel like on this record over here, not so much, mostly because of the way that they kind of brought the RZA into the fold a lot more, and It seems like every single step forward the storyline takes, you get this RZA interlude where he's just like, in a very somber tone, just saying everything that just happened, giving you a little extra, and then giving you a taste of what's just about to happen.
Right, and I like that. It brought me back to, he had that sort of man with the iron fist type narration going on here, which I really picked up on. But on the narration here, like you said, he really kind of filled the holes that they couldn't probably make in the form of a song or they could rap it. So I really like RZA on here, and he really had more of an impact with the story, and he actually revealed more important parts of the story that kind of really set up the tone for the next record, the next couple of records actually. So his presence on here was actually more felt than the first album, I feel. So
yeah, it most definitely was. But I feel like in a way it was kind of at the sacrifice of the songs on this record are a little short.
Yeah.
And maybe some of those details, if they really worked on it, could have been worked into these tracks. Although I think sometimes RZA was used effectively in terms of just dramatic, kind of this cinematic tone that I feel like previously sort of came mostly through the instrumentals. The instrumentals just felt so big and so lavish. And I feel like on this new record over here,
they've got that same kind of old school 70s exploitation film
Mhm.
backdrop to them,
Right.
but you don't have like these big vocal moments like you did on the last record with all the harmonized female vocals where they'd kind of be setting the stage of the story.
Right.
And it's sort of swapping that out instead for, you know, these narrative moments that kind of paint the picture just as well, but in a different way.
Yeah, I agree. I do like though in the beginning of this one where they had they do have the vocals in the beginning to set it up. It's not like the first one where you know you get the Ghostface Killah like
Ghostface Killah,
yeah.
like that was huge.
The first one it was a lot bigger, but I did like when it got into Return of the Savage, and then I think it was let me get her name right. Brooke DeRosa, she's the opera singer on there. The sample that Young used for her was really, really good. It kind of, you know, really gave it that, you know, real, and not as big as in the first one, but it does have, you know, that same vibe. I got that same vibe. It sounded like a real Kill Bill-ish type intro for me. And but I do agree we could have used some more of that on this one and probably, you know, swap that out with some of the narration, or like Adrian Younge did with the actual instrumentals when RZA was doing the narration. He kind of like crafted the backdrop with the sound while he was talking to his tone. And I think if he would have added in some of those vocals too, it would have made it more bigger. But I mean, it's nothing that really made me like, you know, put me off of it. But I think that is something that could have been added. But it's a small thing to me for the most part.
Yeah, it didn't really ruin the record or anything like that. I thought it was just another example of this record taking a very just being able to carry on the style of the last album, but in a slightly different way, where it doesn't feel like a carbon copy, and it feels just still enjoyable, which you know is great considering. I mean that's kind of what I feel like we were getting on that album that Ghostface did not too long ago. What was it, 36 Seasons?
Yeah,
yeah. I feel like he basically starred in a ripoff of his own album.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing because I actually like 36 Seasons, not as much as 12 Reasons Why, but I think it's because he did put a rip himself off and he had the audacity to do that, and he still made, for the most part, a decent album out of it. I mean, that kind of just, you know, I mean, I don't hold it as high as, of course, the 12 Reasons Why or Fish Scale or anything like that, but, you know, the fact that he was able to pretty much take the same story, put it in a different setting, and still pull off an album pretty damn good, that just shows what kind of artist Ghost is, so you can't be too mad at him for that one.
Well, I mean, for the most part, I mean, I did think this record had just a lot of the same flavors as the previous track. I mean, the previous record, but just things done in a slightly different way. I mean, I loved the RZA interludes. Yeah. I thought the instrumentals, while not as show-stopping as the instrumentals from the last record, were still well put together. They still had that old school sound. They still had just great combinations of guitar and bass and drums and flute, and a little bit of vocals occasionally too. They sounded refined and sad when stuff was like emotional. They sounded hard hitting and gritty when there was like a lot of gunplay going on and a lot of action. The characters, the inclusion of Raekwon was pretty good, although I wish some of the side characters that popped up via the features occasionally on the record were a little bit more well developed.
I agree. Especially Scarab and Chino XL. It took me a while to get into who they actually were as far as
what characters they were trying to play.
Right, because it really wasn't fully explained as far as with Lester Kane. Even Vince Staples. I mean, I know he was a henchman, but they didn't really give him his own. We just know him as a henchman for Lester Kane. Yeah. So I think with those, it seemed like they just came in to do a verse and kind of narrate a certain part of the story, but they really didn't get a grasp of who this character was, so it made it kind of forgettable for the most part as far as the character development is. The verses were fine. Like I think Chino XL did a good job. Vince Staples had a great verse. I liked his verse on Get the Money. Scarab I liked on Rise Up. I didn't like him that much on the other track he was on. I felt like he didn't gel on that track to me personally.
That's the Invitation?
Yeah, that's the Invitation. I felt like he didn't really fit on that one as much. Maybe because Chino XL blew him out of the water probably when he took over. But even with those characters, though, you just don't get a grasp, like you said, of who they really are. And it really just focuses on the whole album pretty much just focuses on Lester Kane and Ghostface for the most part. Those are the two people that, you know, you really only get to really find out and know about.
Yeah, most definitely. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I think on this track, this record, as opposed to the last one, I just don't think there was I don't know, enough Ghostface. While I do realize this is a collaborative project between Ghostface and Adrian Younge, and they're kind of coming together for this, creative thing.
Mm-hmm.
Being that Ghostface for a good part of this record is kind of a ghost, literally,
Right.
not really incarnated in any kind of way where you can do any sort of major action.
Right.
A lot of the focus is sort of on Raekwon and the DeLuca's mob and sort of what Raekwon's henchmen are doing.
Right.
And as a result, you do have fewer verses from Ghost and tracks where just Ghost doesn't pop up at all.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like on that track, we were just talking about Death's Invitation. While I did like that song, I mean, that song was interesting, not only in how it advanced the storyline, but also just that they just put the most top-notch spitters on the entire record all on that one track, and it made it eventful. It definitely gave that song a flavor that no other song on the record had, and brought some variety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that too. I think Raekwon, to me personally, I think Raekwon stole the show on this album, maybe because he was the most visible on this album, and he sort of pretty much is.
I think that, I mean, it's not even that he performed super well. It's almost that like the storyline just handed the show over to him.
Right, exactly. And I honestly, even though this is nothing new from Raekwon as far as skill and talent wise, I think after the Fila mishap with that album, this is sort of a little bit of a redemption for it. And it's sort of like, it made me think like, okay, with all this, Raekwon on here, and then you got Ghost, and you got Adrian Younge, it kind of sort of the wheel spinning of maybe what would a Ragu album sound like if Adrian Younge did it all the way. Because that's pretty much what this album is a Raekwon Ghostface album done with some features on it, which was promising if they decide to go full-fledged with that. But I think, Raekwon is probably some of the strongest on this album, is on tracks like Blackout's my favorite track on here, with him going back and forth with Ghostface. Also, King of New York, even on Return to Savage. But I think I was impressed with how consistent he stayed on this whole album and throughout the whole way. And I really got the most out of Raekwon out of anybody on this album, which makes sense because he's the most on this album. So it makes fucking sense. But, he really, if they handed him over the show, then he fucking put on a 5-star performance as far as what he had to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the first half of the record was really Raekwon centric, and having listened to the album multiple times, I enjoy that portion of the record for what it is. For my first listen, I kind of spent a good chunk of this record just being like, man, like when's there going to be more Ghostface? But then, it seems like the second half sort of involves Ghost a little bit more in terms of at least like advancing storyline more.
Right.
And I don't think we want to spoil the ending of the record, but sort of what Ghostface decides to do at the very end of this album. This is a super like cold-blooded moment.
It's pretty fucked up what he did. I'm not gonna lie. When I listened to it, I was like, no way, that's kind of fucked up. But I mean, it's his persona, it's his character, and actually, it really was like that twist ending that you get of a really good movie, and it also opens up possibly more of these albums. You never know what they're gonna do with this. But so I actually like that they went that route with it, because it made a lot more sense, because there's way more to build off with that. So I'm not gonna give away the ending either, but just know if you're listening to this shit, that's a fucking crazy ending that they did on the album. Like, that was whoever wrote that shit, fucking go get a Hollywood job, because that's a twist. I'm
sure.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's even in like a lot of mainstream rated R movies, you don't really get an ending quite that cold-blooded.
Right, exactly. And the only thing about it, though, is, like I said, I'm not going to give it away, but one thing that kind of irked me about it is, going back to the RZA's narration, there were parts where it wasn't really, they weren't pretty much linear, as far as like the RZA would say one sort of detail about the setup, but then within the song, a different event, the same event, but a different way it would go down. And I caught that about 2 times in this album, and I'm not sure if that's like based on the fact that the songs were written and then RZA came in and wrote it or said it differently, or vice versa. But I felt like that was one small detail that should have been picked up on and probably reworked on, because I nitpick on those types of things, because if you're gonna tell a story, make sure all the seams are tight and everything is in there, because if I picked up on that twice, if I listen to it again, I may pick up on something else. But that's just around the end. It's not a killer for the album, but it made me go like, you should have probably, kept on the same story with the narration. And
it's a really important moment, because this is such a story album,
right?
And the story above everything, should be super well hammered out, especially considering like, the the songwriting, a lot of these tracks are short, and the hooks aren't super strong or anything like that. So you're mostly tuning into the verses in order to sort of tease out what the album is supposed to be delivering to you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think there are moments like the hook on the song "Get the Money" with Vince Staples, where Ghost is like, he's sort of doing this a bit of a, he's rapping, but it kind of sounds more like talking over the hook, and he's talking at this really weird speed, and they either doubled his vocals up or through this.
Yeah, it sounded kind of weird when I heard it. At first, when I heard it, I thought there was like probably just like something wrong with my headphones at first, or my system. But then when I went back and listened, it's just an effect that they put on it. But I think it's not strong, and it kind of like makes the hook sound really, really weak for the most part.
It's not that well written, and on top of it, you could barely make out what the vocals are saying, you know.
Right.
But moments like that, I mean, I gloss over a little bit because Vince Staples was good. The storyline is good. The the twist was good. There are a lot of good things about this record, but when stuff like that is going to be on the back burner, and you know it's going to be on the back burner, the story's got to be watertight.
Right. Exactly. Especially because this is, if you want to look at this from a standpoint, it's a sequel. It's a sequel album,
Absolutely.
and the dreaded sequels are always worse than the first movie. This had the potential to be better because the story itself was a way better story if they would have just hammered out those details, like you said, and also tightened up with the actual songwriting, making sure everything sounds really good. Then I think this album would have clearly took the first 12 Reasons to Die Chain, no problem, because I think that the features are better on here. It's less wu-tang on here, of course, but when the features come in here, even though you don't know the characters, I feel fit the story more, and they actually are more believable than some of the features on the previous album. So I like that about it, and also I think the production on here I actually enjoyed a little bit more. It's not like you said it's extravagant, but I think with the narrative that they had, it fit perfectly, especially like tracks like Blackout and Get the Money. Pretty much every track fit what the tone of the song was supposed to be. So Adrian Younge, actually, I think he was more detailed and more focused on the production standpoint as far as trying to find the perfect sound to complement Ghost and Raekwon and anybody else and make sure that this story sounds believable, because listening to it, it sounds like a movie. Like you can play it as a movie just from the sonic feel of it, just by how Adrian Younge crafted it around these characters. So I think he improved on that from the first one for me. That's all I have to say.
All right, let's get this wrapped up. Would you recommend this record? Did you like it more than the last record? In brief, what are you thinking about it?
You know what? It took me a while to determine, but I'm actually on the same level. I like this album for different reasons, but overall for the same reasons too, the same amount. So I have to say, just like the first one, I gave it a Granddad approved. Little things aside, this is a great album, great story, production's good, features are great. So I gotta give it a Granddad approved, Anthony. I like it. The shit's dope. Okay. Overall, yes, it's fucking amazing still, even after all those things. And I'm waiting for 3. I think there's gonna be a 3, and if there is, I'm all over it because I want to know what's gonna happen next.
I'm liking it too. I think it's really great. I don't love it as much as 12 Reasons to Die 1, but this album was enjoyable from front to back. It has a lot of great characteristics, put together well, good rap performances too, good production, and it does leave a cliffhanger for the third one. And I think while this does feel like a little bit of a lull for me now, it could really be tied together with a third record with just like, a really great trilogy. And hopefully that great third part comes sooner rather than later, and without any other attempts to try to make a story album without Adrian Younge.
Right. Yeah, they can't. They're too far in. They're too deep now. They can't change the formula now. They're fucked up forever. So, like, for all we know, they're probably working on it right now because this one came out fairly soon from the last one. So they could already have this. They already probably said there's going to be 3 or more. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm keeping an eye on it. But yeah, it's a good album. It's good. I mean, yeah, I would probably put it. If you want to put a number on it, I give 12 Reasons 1 a 10. I'd give this a 9 based on things, but I still enjoy it the same. And I'm gonna play this shit to fucking probably 12 Reasons Die 3, or what they make.
As far as this record, I gave 12 Reasons to Die, I think like a strong 8 or something. I would probably give this one a 7. It's still a very good record. I recommend it too. It's not quite as standalone, I think, as 12 Reasons to Die 1, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you haven't heard the first one, take this opportunity to go listen to the first one. And then,
listen to them back to back. Then you really sound like you're watching the fucking movie. That's what I did. I listened to one, and then I listened to two right after. And I got popcorn, and I sat there and listened to that shit, and it's like a fucking movie. If you close your eyes, the shit's fucking dope. It's like you really get it. Now I want to know. I mean, it's like a cliffhanger, and it's like it's like the greatest. It's like Adrian Younge, just as a general, is a great producer. Ghostface, of course, is a legend. And this story that they created, even though it's nothing really new from the whole wu-tang, things like that, but it's just an awesome story, an awesome concept, and I like it, and I hope they build on it and really close it out properly, because it deserves that. With how great it's already going, it deserves the proper closeout. So that's what I'm looking forward to now, as far as this supposed trilogy is going to be. That's what I'm calling it.
all right, that's the review of this record. Again, I want to thank Wooly for coming on to just review it with me.
Thank you for having me.
I will put a link down in the description box to his YouTube channel so you can check out his.
Watch that shit. There's a ton of videos. Watch it.
And yeah, that's it. Anthony Fantano, Wooly, Ghostface Killah, Adrian Younge, Raekwon the Chef, 12 Reasons to Die Part 2. Forever.